And we are live.
Oh, hello there, and welcome to the Social Services Committee meeting for March 2nd. Just a reminder that this is a hybrid meeting. Attendance has been noted by the clerk. We have a mayor and a councillor in person. They'll get first dibs on speaking order when they raise their hands, and then the participants via Zoom will be noted as such in the order that they put their hand up. I'd like to remind members of council, staff, and reviewing public that about the electronic participation policy for the hybrid meetings. Again, for those staff and delegates joining electronically, please keep your videos and microphones off until requested by the moderator or members of council. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. The full corporate policy number 50 regarding virtual participation in meetings is available online to review. And in the event of a connection or service interruption that occurs that affects quorum of the committee, we may recess for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for any of the items appearing on the agenda today? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Let's look at the separation of items for consideration and consent items for discussion purposes. Can I get a mover and seconder to place all items for consideration on the floor? Councillor Sless, seconded by Councillor Miller. Are there any items that the committee wishes to separate? Mayor Davis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 5.1, the discretionary benefits review.
Is that all?
And 5.4.
5.4.
177 Colburn Street.
Thank you. Any others remain? Councillor Bell? Nope, Councillor Bell and Woodstock. Okay, so that means we are going to be moving. Just 1 second here. Does anybody want to move 5.2? Because I believe we have an amendment that may be coming for that one.
Sure.
Okay, Mayor Davis is going to move that 5.2 be separated. Okay, I'll now call the vote on all items not separated. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to 5.1, discretionary benefits review. Mayor Davis, you have the floor if you'd like it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It's great joining the brave and free here in-person meeting, and great to be surrounded by my council colleagues from the county. But my question is for staff, and I think the report's telling us that we have saved a considerable amount of money due to the change we made in respect to the funeral benefit, which I believe was predicted. And I think it's going to generate as much as $100,000 in revenue or funding. So could you please, through you, Mr. Chair, could you please explain, one, are we going to be utilizing all of those surplus monies through the changes you've made to the other discretionary benefits? And if you might describe for the viewers what benefits were increasing or expanding with the savings in respect to the funeral expense.
Good morning. Through the chair, the savings that are generated, we do expect that this year we are going to monitor that closely. What we have seen with some of these are the types of benefits that have significant impact on people's quality of life, such as dental services, dentures, but they're also things that for some people were a little more difficult to access during the pandemic. If you've been to a dental office, for example, you realize that often you need a smartphone and you need to go through a number of procedures. So I think we'll be looking to see what the uptake is on the new items and what we see this year as the pandemic perhaps changes, the services that people are accessing. So the answer is we will know better at the end of this year, likely. And this, just to remind the committee, is a pot of money that the province funds 100%. And what we're interested in doing is using as much and all of it, if we can, but without going over. Because if you go over, it it becomes a municipal cost. So we're always really monitoring this line closely. Some of the things that have, that have seen increases are things like bathroom aids, compression stockings, dentures, sort of significant enhancement to dentures, which were only provided 10 years under the previous program. And now we've increased both the upper and lower plate maximums and also the frequency with which people can access dentures, which is significant. There are some new items like paramedical and hospital beds, and just better access, I think, to dental care by using the newer and more up-to-date schedule.
Mr. Chair, follow up. Thank you, Sue, for that high-level overview. But what do you anticipate will be the additional funds available to fund these other types of benefits? What are you predicting it will be?
Our projection through the chair right now is in the range of $150,000. Could be more, depending again on uptake of the other items that has been lower because of pandemic.
Right. So, Mr. Chair, I want to thank staff for the report, and certainly I can support what we're doing here, which is what we intended to do. We made the decision early last year, and that is increasing not only the type of discretionary benefit and programs and services, but also the expanding what we currently have, so that those who truly need the assistance in their lives for important things that have a direct impact on the quality of their life and their health, we're going to be doing more for them, and that's clearly a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor McAlpine, do you have anything to say on this before I go to the Zoom? No? Okay, Councillor Miller, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the dental fee guide. It's recommended that we go from a 28-year-old dental fee guide from 1994 to a 13-year-old dental fee guide from 2009. I'm guessing, from my understanding of the report, this is a municipal decision. Is that correct? On what fee guide to use? This is completely our decision.
Yes, through Chair Laferriere. Yes, it is.
Okay, it's not a provincial directive or anything like that. Okay, I'm just wondering, in this high inflationary environment, which impacts almost every report you read now in social services, do we have enough dentists? Is it an issue getting dentists willing to provide these services at the 2009 rate, or is that not an issue just yet?
Okay, through the chair, thank you for the question. That is definitely part of our analysis, and actually our dental service provider, Accenture, which is highly experienced in working with dental practitioners and with other both social assistants and provincial offices, did complete that analysis for us and made the recommendation to go to 2009, which will still provide a reasonable increase in this year. We will be looking at it both in terms of our envelope of funding and our and the practitioner costs at the end of this year again, to see if we can go further. But I will say that that is the majority of Ontario Works offices are using that were reviewed. We're using that 209 schedule, as is the province for their ODSP program. So we believe that the local dentists are familiar and working within those rates, and we have had a good level of support from local dentists. However, we are concerned about restricting people's access and choice if there are dentists that will only service a certain number of individuals at that rate. So we haven't found that to be a large issue even with our low rates, but we will be watching it with the new rates as well.
Okay, I appreciate the answer. I appreciate the fact that you're watching, because yeah, I could see that being an issue, in a couple of years. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. So not quite a problem yet, hasn't been, but let's hope it isn't. Councillor Bell, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very interesting report. I'm looking at figure 1 on page 10 of our report, and what is quite clear is the degree to which the expenditure on funerals has been reduced significantly. And I'm really pleased that funding is being redirected to other healthcare requirements. My question, though, is, have we gone too far on funerals? And I know that I've raised this before, but there are still concerns within the county about the ability of county residents who find themselves in the situation where they need help with assisted funerals, that they can't get the service that they're looking for. And I would like to have the opportunity, I'd like to see our staff take the opportunity to do a review of the assisted funerals specifically for the county. And if they find at the end of the day that there is no issue, which I will be surprised with given the degree of feedback that I get, then I will stop complaining about this issue. And with, as the Mayor Davies has said, let's look to see where we can redirect even more of this funding to other healthcare facilities. So I would like to make a motion to ask staff to take a second look at funerals, assisted funerals within the county. And I'm looking for a seconder.
We do have a seconder, but I want to get Councillor McCreary in on this for a second, because I think he may have possibly a point of order, but I'm not sure.
Chair, thank you. I would refer that to staff and ask if the councillor's resolution should be considered a reconsider with respect to the City of Brantford's rules and procedures, because the assisted funerals proceeded through this committee and through the councils as part of a report that was accepted by resolution. So I'd be looking to the city's clerk for a ruling on that before we go ahead and discuss and vote, Mr. Chair.
Yep, fair enough.
Repeat the question.
Councillor McCreary, can you state that again for the clerk? Clerk was taking some notes.
Yes, the councillor has introduced an amendment here, which has us revisiting a prior decision made by this committee and by the councils. And my question would be, should this be properly put as a reconsider motion?
Through the chair, that would be correct. It would be a reconsideration if it's aiming to reconsider the past decision.
Thank you.
So then we would have to vote to reconsider to then get the motion on the floor.
Through the chair, that would be correct.
Okay, do we want to go that route, or do we want to have some more? Councillor Bell, do we want to just park this for a minute, get some more comments, and then see what we can do procedurally?
Happy to park it for a minute.
Okay, Councillor Antosky.
Yes, Chair, just given the turn in the conversation, I will now have to declare a conflict of interest on this. Our family business is in the funeral products business, and many of the people involved are our clients.
Okay, thank you. So you won't be voting on this one? Okay, we're just getting some discussion from the clerks. While that happens, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking of what Councillor Bell brought up, well, maybe Councillor Bell can clarify. I thought he was asking that it just be looked at to see what the effects have been, I think, on the county. Is that correct? Not a reconsideration of the entire thing, but just what the impacts have been. I mean, we do that all the time. We bring in a motion, we change things, and then a year later or 6 months later, we look at how things are going. But I'll leave that to Councillor Bell to clarify.
Yeah,
that's what I understood the motion to be.
Yeah, thank you. One of the issues that I'm seeing with this is that, I mean, could this just be direction to staff to look at one factor or an update as opposed to a reconsideration? But we'll talk to the clerk, and the clerk will talk to us, and we'll see. Oh, sorry, Mayor Davis has his hand up and he's in the room.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Councillor Miller. If the resolution is that we reconsider, then and make a decision, then obviously the rules would apply for reconsideration. But I would tend to view this a bit differently than my fellow Councillor McCreary, in the sense that I think it's just a request for further information. And let's face it, we were concerned, we made that decision, what the impact would be in the county. And I'd certainly be interested in knowing, what the uptake's been, and whether there is something we might do to improve the service being provided in the county. And I think, why not have that information? But certainly when it comes back, if this passes and we have a staff report come back to us, then we may be into a reconsideration with various rules that apply. That'd be my view of it for what it's worth.
But just a report isn't asking for reconsideration in and of itself. So clerk, what have you and your fellow clerks discussed?
So I would defer partially to social services staff to determine whether the motion would actually be germane to the item, whether the funeral services is actually germane to the item at hand. But if it is the case that we wanted to reconsider this item, it actually would be reconsidered at council because it was a decision of council, not a decision of the Social Services Committee.
Okay, because it was from the previous setup as well.
That's correct.
Okay, so would folks be maybe satiated somewhat if we have it on staff's radar that we'd like some more information regarding the effective county? If not, then we may have to do a notice of motion and a motion at another time. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, that would satisfy me, Mr. Chair, as long as staff made the appropriate contacts with funeral directors in the county to get first-hand experience, because they're the people on the front line of this particular issue. I can't speak to all the details, they can. If staff did speak to funeral directors, came back with a report and a review of whether we've gone far enough or too far, I would be comfortable with that. And then we could go into the reconsideration of the motion as Councillor McCreary suggests.
Mm-hmm. Or you could have the information and, as you said, find out that, you know, if maybe there's not a reason to complain, maybe there is, but we need that information before we can even consider a reconsideration.
Correct.
Fair? Okay. Mayor Bailey, are you okay with that as a seconder to remove it, to have it staff direction for this time, and we can always come back to it?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Bailey. Councillor Antosky, you are now no longer in the moral gray zone. So
that's, I was just about to say, I no longer have a conflict. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent.
Oops.
Any more discussion on this one? Okay, well then I will, and thank you for bearing with me on my first in-person meeting in 2 years and my first hybrid meeting ever. I'd like to now call the vote on 5.1. All those in favor? And I see that carries unanimously. Okay, moving to 5.2. Mayor Davis, you asked for this one to be separated as well, so you have first speaking opportunity.
I think I agreed to do that since I was asked to do it because there's an amendment of some kind.
I think I'm the chair and I can't make the amendment, and I think you're the only person who has the amendment in front of you.
I don't have anything in front of me.
Okay. So, well,
okay. I think I want to make an amendment. So can you show it on the screen?
This one I can't take the blame for. This isn't on me.
Yeah, it seems like I'm confused for the second day in a row.
There we go. Can you see that?
Oh, yes. My memory. Yes. Chair, I'd like to move seeking a seconder. The staff be directed to send communications to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in regards to the homeownership component of the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative, recommending a review of the program in order to be more reflective of the current market. This would include, but not be limited to, the eligibility criteria, purchase price, and eligible unit types. Looking for a seconder. Thank you.
Seconded by Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, so the reason for this, how could I have forgotten this? It has to do with, when we read in the report, there's a home ownership plan that's intended to help those who are the low income, at the low end of the income spectrum, assisting them in purchasing a home. As kind of a down payment type assistance program. And we know from the limits that are built into the program that it's really not very effective. There's not much uptake because the maximum home price is, I think, $400,000, and there's caps in terms of income. So although these limits may have made sense 3 years ago, with what's happened in the market, those limits are having a major impact on the viability of the program. So the motion is asking the province, hey, look at what's happened in the market the last 2 years. I think you need to adjust the limits that are built into the program to make it more flexible, and so that more people can take advantage of it and end up with a home they own.
Actually, does anybody want to speak on this before, on the amendment that does have a seconder? No, I'll just say this. When you look at one of the caps being $400,000 for a home, there are some derelict homes on my old paper route in Brantford that are going for over that, that are 2-bedroom, 1 bath. So looking at families trying to access some of these pieces would be very, very difficult. So I agree completely with and I plan on supporting it. With no further comments, I'll call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? So moved. Okay, so now is there any discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, then I'll call the vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Councillor Wall? So moved. Okay, moving on to 5.4, 177 Colburn Street West Development Update with a financial impact of $6.3 million. I think we're going to staff on this first, or no, Mayor Davis, you move this one as well. Okay.
Yeah, this, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, this has to do with the proposed development for this year out on Colburn Street West using the modular concept. It's a very exciting concept, but we know that further investigation has indicated that there are certain environmental issues. So I'm wondering if staff can highlight for us, one, the gravity or the seriousness of those issues, and two, what remedial measures, are there remedial measures that we could use to make the property safe to be used? And three, can you give us some indication what they might be? It's sort of hinted in the report, but I wonder if we could be a little bit more forthcoming in terms of what it is what the problem is, how serious it is, and are there steps that can be taken to mitigate and make the property safe for the intended use?
So through the chair, if I may, we have asked Ed Taves, the consultant working with ANC, to be available today to provide that information. So through the chair, if I may refer it to Mr. Taves, he'll be able to answer those questions.
Ed, are you there?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was making some quick notes as you were listing sort of your questions. If I don't catch them all, please let me know. Regarding contamination, there is soil and groundwater contamination. The soil contamination has been remediated, so only the groundwater contamination remains. It's a VOC, it's a solvent, perchloroethylene, that's in the groundwater at quite a low concentration over the whole site. So does it exceed a regulatory guideline? Yes, that's the problem. Is it a high/alarming number? No. So from a remediation perspective, cleaning up the groundwater really is not an option. Pump and treat, you can't really clean it up. And I'll add one more point. The contaminant is migrating onto your property from adjacent lands. So arguably you're not even in control of the contaminant. So there is contaminated groundwater migrating under your property. It's not very high, so it needs to be managed. And the management solution is a risk assessment. It's a regulatory process to identify, quote, what needs to be done. And we can't know the outcome of the risk assessment, but there's quite a bit of information on the table already. We've spoken to the Ministry of Environment. We're very confident that the solution will be basically completion of the risk management measures to give you a higher standard for your property, and potentially some soil vapor mitigation, a liner under the building. Now, not even that sure that's going to be required, but the worst control measure, risk management measure likely required is a liner under your building. To put it into perspective, vapor barrier on your wall to keep moisture out, basically a plastic liner under your building that would keep vapors from coming up. But I really don't think we're going to end up there.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's having had some prior experience, these kinds of issues, I'm no expert in it, but in my legal career, we live in a city that has a 150-year industrial history, and this kind of low-level environmental issue, it's relatively, I'm not going to say it's widespread, but it's you come across it fairly frequently. And the issue, of course, is the severity. We're being told by the expert that it's not alarming. It's just barely over the regulatory levels. And there are ways to deal with it. And it's kind of like the pandemic. You learn to live with it. And I'm hopeful that with a further investigation that it'll demonstrate that the situation is as Mr. Hayes describes it, and that we have remedial measures and that we proceed because it's an important project for us. It's in an area of the city, a major artery where you would expect that you would construct medium density residential. There's a lot of very positive aspects to this project, and we'll see what further investigation indicates. And as I said, hopefully, as Mr. Hayes indicated, that there will be remedial measures can be taken to make the property safe.
Davis. We have in the queue, Councillors McCreary, then Vanderstelt, then Miller, then Sluss. McCreary, you have the floor.
Sure, thanks. So to be clear, we do intend to proceed on this site with the project planned?
The answer is yes, but did you want that from staff?
Yes.
Okay, Marlene, you're on mute.
My apologies. Through the chair, Councillor McCreary, absolutely. We do, given the information from the consultant and having worked with them,
Okay.
We do plan on proceeding, and that is the recommendation.
And the start date on site will be?
So through the chair, are you referring to start date on the work for the work currently being done with the environmental or other?
Let me rephrase that. When will the building be occupied?
With the extension that was recently approved and with the work being done, the plan is to have occupancy by the end of 2022.
Excellent. Now, with respect to the minor contamination beneath the ground, I would suspect that the minor contamination had proceeded over a number of decades, resulting in the need to excavate that site. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So now, so we've got stuff migrating onto our site, which is the reverse of the condition that we had with respect to the Massey Cockshutt lands, and sort of similar to what we had with the Keepright lands in the beautiful Fourth Ward, as Councillor Carpenter would say. So when does the minor contamination become major contamination? What's our estimate of that date?
Is that Ed? Ed, can you speak to that?
I can't say we're 100% sure of the source, but in discussion with the Ministry of Environment, they believe they know the source. They are working with that property, and there's every reason, and there's actually data to show that the situation's getting better and getting better fairly fast, actually. So no reason to suspect it's going to get worse.
Okay. And perhaps this could be referred to our legal department, Marlene, to ask about recourse against the neighboring property that's contaminated our lands. Okay. If you could ask them to provide that to the committee in a memo. So the consultant mentioned the phrase higher standard. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Could you explain that a little bit, Ed?
It's through the chair. The Ministry of Environment sets provincial standards based on a variety of conservative assumptions for every exposure scenario. And a good example will be there's standards applicable to fish that apply to your property. So when we do a risk assessment, we say, okay, there's a lot of exposure scenarios, a lot of risks that don't apply to your site. So you take all those out. So all of a sudden, various, copper is aquatic toxicant. It's not relevant. So all of a sudden that standard goes way up.
So we can be pretty sure that we should be prohibiting people from fishing on the site because it wouldn't be good for them to eat that. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe.
I hope you meant that in jest.
Maybe I should introduce an amendment, a no fishing amendment, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. That satisfies my concerns, guys. Much appreciated.
Improv at the Zoom. Okay, Councillor McCreary, thank you for that. Councillor Vanderstelt, you are next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ed. So if we're just marginally higher according to the standard on VOCs, and it's a flow onto this site from another location, Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that affected by the flood about 3 years ago that occurred in Brantford? Did that have an effect on this groundwater and the striation and the volume of VOCs that increased on this property?
Ed?
Weather events, flood events will affect the rate of flow, but really the answer is no, in that, the industrial facilities, as was mentioned, are releasing contaminants, were releasing contaminants. So you have a plume in the area. Yes, a flood may spread the plume a little faster, but it's really not fundamentally changing the contaminant flow characteristics.
Okay, but you said they were decreasing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so on what site have we gleaned that evidence that it is indeed decreasing?
The Ministry of Environment has been doing some work in the area. So they've got a series of monitoring wells in a fairly large area along your road allowances, that sort of thing. So there's data going back, well, I'll say a decade and a half. And the concentrations in the area, so not property specific, in the area are going down. So
Okay.
it's a good data set.
Okay, wonderful. And then among the risk management options you spoke about, one of them was a ground sheet, the other one was aeration. Is there a possibility that both may be recommended for this site?
Aeration, air stripping, the concentrations simply are not high enough to warrant, quote, that level of effort.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, that's good news. There was some consternation about this site and the contamination level in the public eye, and all of your answers have certainly gone a long ways to alleviate those concerns. Thank you so much, Ed. Are those results available, those ministry results available? Should somebody ask whether or not they can have verifiable test results over the last 10 years to prove that the contamination has indeed dropped? Are those available somewhere?
Yes, some reports have been sent to the city historically.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to quickly add to that question, Ed, are those public facing documents or are they to the city and the city alone?
They will be public documents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just looking at the report, the contamination, remediation, and delayed constructions because of all this amount to $750,000. So Councillor McCurry already brought it up, but I just want to emphasize, and I don't know, but I when I read the report, the first thought that comes to my head is there an opportunity to recoup some of those costs from the originator of those pollutants, or has the horse already left the building? So it's already been referred to legal to maybe look at that. So that's what I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad Councillor McCurry brought it up. So thank you.
Just supportive of that. Councillor Sless and then Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the plume underground a large plume, or is it a small, or have we determined that?
Large and small is always a little bit of a tough one to answer. It goes over blocks, like city blocks. Okay, so it's not miles long, but
the portion on the subject property, is that a large part of the property that's
the property is a small area within the plume. So the plume covers the whole property.
It covers the whole property. Okay.
Yes.
And is it scientifically, is it going to dissipate over time to the point that it becomes just irrelevant?
Short answer is yes. The timeline can be quite long, but yes, it should dissipate from a volatile perspective quite quickly, like decades.
Okay. And then I guess lastly, we keep talking about an adjoining property or an adjacent property. Are we talking about the Stelco property? Is that the one we're assuming it's originating from?
No.
Okay, good.
Groundwater is coming from the west.
Okay, because I saw they were doing some trenching on that property, and I wondered if that was related to this project.
Yeah, I don't think Stelco's on the list of potential sites, sources.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. One question, one comment. Having identified that the source of the contamination is elsewhere, do we have an obligation to advise the people in the general area that they are subject to the same contamination that we are experiencing here? I'll stop at that point now. I'll give you my comment again.
Disclosure is really a legal question. The Ministry of Environment is working with the source property. So I would say any requirement for disclosure, public notification, is happening via the ministry working with the source property. And that's the reason the city has reports, like you were notified. So disclosure is happening. And again, whether the city has an obligation, I'll refer that to legal.
Actually, I'd like that referred to, one second, Councillor Bell. I'd like that referred to legal when the report comes about what Councillor McCurry asked for. Let's add disclosure just to quell Councillor Bell and other councillors' minds.
Okay, thank you. Second point is a comment, and it's in regard to the discussion about the opportunity to recover costs from the source of the contamination. I see it differently. I see it that we rushed through this project because of the time constraints put on us by the province in terms of the funding that they were offering. And in my world, when I was working, this would be described as a failure for us to do due diligence. And it comes back to the old maxim of measure twice, cut once. And, we did not measure twice on this one. So I would be absolutely against the idea of trying to put the blame on somebody else for this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, before we go to secondary speakers, is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to? Is there anybody in the room who'd like to speak? Then no. Councillor Vanderstel, you have your second speaking opportunity.
Thank you, Chair Ferrier. So none of the risk management models that we may use would compromise the extension that we've gotten on funding. Is that correct, Marlene?
Through the chair, Councillor Vanderstel, that is correct. We went through the process of explaining what was going on with the ministry and requested the extension based on that. And we have received the extension as per the report, I believe on February the 15th.
Okay, well, just a comment then. I really want to extend my thanks and my congratulations to all who put so much hard work into this project as a whole, considering all of the obstacles that showed up in our way, pandemic excluded. These are troubling obstacles. We were hoping for a quick delivery of a much needed project that would serve the needs of at least the people in the area in a very critical time. And I just want to applaud all of the hard work and dedication that went into all of the nuances of finding a way through, getting an extension on the funding, finding additional funding, overcoming the obstacles that were, one or after another. And I want to thank you for that, because this population of people definitely needs that hand up, needs that support, and well done all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I believe Councillor McCurry, this is your second speaking opportunity.
Chair, thank you very much. I want to very gently remind participants in today's meeting that we are subject to the City of Brantford's rules and regulations with respect to how we conduct ourselves in meetings. And I just want to stress that the use of certain terms and language perhaps approached the line with respect to talking about our staff not having done due diligence, and with respect to using the phrase putting blame on somebody else. So I would just caution everybody that we've got staff in the room who do a damn good job for us. And let's not be throwing stones at them. This project is a big project. Our staff have done an admirable job here. And I don't think we've got receptive ears to that kind of language, guys. Okay, so just a caution. Thank you.
Councillor McCreary, thank you. Councillor Bell.
Chair, I was certainly not throwing stones at staff because staff were directed in this respect by council.
Well, I push back about that a little bit, and I will as chair. You had stated that it was due to funding requirements from higher levels of government as well, which is not something we're not used to. When we looked at some of the funding that came through other times of economic distress, we saw that we have to move fast sometimes to get that granted money from other levels of government. And I do think you did mention that, and I think that is a pertinent part of this. Do you have something to say to that, or are you good to move forward? Okay, I do have a question for Ed. Ed, if you're still on the line. One, I want to thank you for making an effort to be here on short notice to answer these questions. It's great having it from the consultant who's an expert in this field, as opposed to trying to ask environmental stability questions of social services staff, who are very happy you're here as well. When we're looking at the soil vapor mitigation, the liner, and other mitigation and management efforts, it was noted that it would be about $750,000. If those are done, in your professional opinion, basically there was recently a pretty striking headline in one of the local newspapers about this. I would ask very plainly and very clearly, if those mitigation and management efforts are made, what's the actual effect on future residents?
Based on the available data, we're not anticipating any requirements, to be honest. Not all the data's in, so I can't say that's going to be the outcome, but we're not anticipating any significant effect. And the whole reason for doing a risk assessment is to ensure it is safe for future residents. So from an actual occupied space, no effect.
Thank you. I just wanted that on the record. I think we've all been talking around that, but that's a really important fact to have on the record. Any more discussion on this before we call the vote? Okay, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. Let me move to page 4 of my document. There are no resolutions. There are no notices of motion. So I will call the meeting adjourned. We will be meeting again on the first Wednesday of April. Thank you all, and thank you to staff, Mayor Davis as well, for the prep meetings leading to this meeting. Really appreciated. Hybrid is an interesting way to chair. I'll leave it at that. Thank you all, and we'll see you next month.